Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. You know, the one thing about the Republicans, they're masters at doing stuff when nobody else is watching. You need to watch this story. On the heels of a national holiday, honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, here comes a radical governor who is spearheading an outright subversion of democracy. It's happening in Florida. Governor Rick Scott's voter purge in the state of Florida is tossing eligible voters off the rolls who are now under a deadline to prove that they're actually eligible to vote. Bill Internicola. Pay attention to this, folks. Look at this guy. He's a war hero. He's a veteran. He's just one example. He is a 91-year-old decorated veteran of the World War II, who received a letter telling him, you know, buddy, you're not a U.S. citizen, and therefore you're ineligible to vote. Now, to correct this mistake, you know what he's got to do? This veteran must now request a hearing with the supervisor of elections to prove that he is a United States citizen.
I was amazed when I got the letter, I have to tell you that. I've been voting since I was 18 years old, or what it was. I don't know. And I never had any trouble.
All right. Now, you got to be thinking what's going on here. He was joined by two congressmen from Florida calling on Governor Rick Scott to immediately suspend the voter purge. Here's Congressman Alcee Hastings of Broward County.
Who made the decision to put these names on a list? Why did you make that decision? When did you make that decision? And if you made that decision recently when Mr. Internicola and others received the letter, why didn't you do it a long time before this election?
Well, here are the facts of what Governor Rick Scott and Florida Secretary of State are doing. The total is 180,000 voters in the state of Florida have been identified as potential non-citizens using a DMV database, which does not automatically update someone becoming a citizen. In Miami County alone, more than 1,600 voters were called non-citizens, and already 359 people on the list have provided proof of their citizenship. In other words, Florida is purging voters from the rolls based on a flawed system. The purge is hitting the Hispanic community the hardest. Senator Bill Nelson of Florida told a Hispanic audience they are under attack. The most precious right of all of our rights in America is to the right to vote, and it is being assaulted right here. Nelson said this to the League of United Latin American Citizens in Tampa. A coalition of civil rights and voting rights groups have asked Florida Secretary of State Ken Denster to stop the voter purge or risk a lawsuit. They say federal law prohibits voters being removed from the rolls less than 90 days before an election. Florida holds a primary election on August 14th. Now, the next presidential election could be stolen right before our eyes if this flawed voter purge is not halted. Maureen Russo is another voter who has thrown off the rolls. She is a Fort Lauderdale resident who has legally voted in Florida for 40 years. 2 weeks ago, the state of Florida said that they had information indicating that she was not born in this country. She immediately requested an administrative hearing, but has not yet received a response. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: does the Justice Department need to get involved in the voter purge in Florida? Text A for yes, text B for no to 622-639. And you can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. Joining me tonight is Mike Ertl, Supervisor of Elections for Seminole County, Florida. Mr. Ertl, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time. Now, the state cannot revoke voting privileges in Florida. It can only be done by the supervisors of elections in each of Florida's 67 counties. And you're one of those supervisors. What is the process? What's going on here?
Well, the process is, and by the way, I do want to point out something. Thanks a lot for pointing out Memorial Day yesterday, Veterans Day coming up in November. As someone who served 8 years in the Army, this is voting. And by the way, I voted overseas while I was in the Army. Voting is such an important thing for us to
All right, let's get to the point. I understand you want to make a statement about all of this. What is your governor in Florida doing to the voting rolls? Let's get to it.
Well, I think what's occurred is the Department of State has sent down, and you asked about the process, Department of State has sent down a dictate saying that we need to use the database that they've given us and send a letter to our neighbors and asking our neighbors and our friends sometimes to prove their citizenship, to show us their papers, to prove that they're a citizen of the U.S. The database that they used, as you pointed out earlier, was based upon the DMV database, which is something that is, the right to vote is dramatically more important than the right to drive. So not updating your DMV record should not invalidate your right to cast a ballot.
So the governor's wrong, and you're willing to say that?
Well, I'm willing to say that the system that was put in place is not only is not timed as in the most efficient fashion to build voter confidence. So our 67 supervisors of elections in the state are trying our best to make sure that when we contact the voters, we do so with some dignity and with a little bit of grace. And we're trying to do exactly that. But
Mr. Erdahl, these folks have to meet a deadline or they're not going to be able to vote. Mm-hmm. What more of an example does the state of Florida need than a 90-year-old veteran, decorated World War II? If that, you should scrap all of this and start over, shouldn't you?
Well, I think that the list really should have been vetted quite a bit more before they were given to us. Because once it was given to the supervisors of elections, we were mandated by Florida statute. Florida law says we have to go through the process of then contacting that voter, giving them 30 days to show us their papers and to verify that they are citizens.
We're talking about 180,000 people that could be just thrown off the rolls. If a voter cannot go to the hearing before the election, are they going to be able to get a provisional ballot and maybe vote, or how's that work?
Absolutely, and that's our goal, is to let the voters know. I mean, in Seminole County we have only 6, so it's very easy for me to put a face on every single one of these 6 folks. And by the way, of the 6, only 2 have ever cast a ballot, so it's easy for me to put a face on that, and to tell those voters quickly and right away if they want to provide a provisional ballot on election day, absolutely, and then they show citizenship paperwork at that time, we'll count it, because our role is not to disenfranchise folks. Our role is to open the door and allow everyone who wants to cast a ballot, who's legally able to cast a ballot.
Okay. Good to have you with us tonight, Mr. Erdahl. Thank you very much. Now let's turn to Mitchell Caesar. He is the chairman of the Broward County Democratic Party, and he is also on the executive board of the DNC as a representative of the 14 southern states. Mr. Caesar, good to have you on tonight. We're talking about 180,000 people, which could swing the election in Florida, and of course it's warm out right now. It's the beginning of summer. Nobody's paying attention. But the Republicans apparently are trying to steal the election. I mean, that's how I view this story. The former Florida Secretary of State said that the list was unreliable, and he refused. OK, so Governor Rick Scott, he just kept pushing this, didn't he?
Well, and you're exactly right. And I'm willing to say that this governor is wrong. This is not a new high for voter suppression. This is a new low. If you're a student, it makes it more difficult. If you're in the military, it makes it more difficult. If you are a recently married woman with a name change, it makes it more difficult. And when we're talking about provisional ballots, we know that most often they're not fully counted. This was specifically designed by the Republican game plan to suppress the vote. It got worse. They decided to cut early voting hours in Florida in half. They changed the element where churches were used significantly as voting locations. That has changed. It's adversely affecting working people because of the lesser number of voting days available in early voting. And it's significantly impacting African-American churchgoers who make it a historical pilgrimage to vote if they can on Sunday. So let's think about this. Is this just coincidence that it affects adversely young people, the military, working people, African Americans and Hispanics? I don't think there are any coincidences here. You think this is part of the game plan to throw the election? I think absolutely this is a Republican game plan hatched among Republican groups in the last year or two, unveiling it because they realized that President Obama had great success in signing up new voters in 2008, young people and a lot of folks never engaged before. They now have 2 tasks to stop that. They have to put these voting provisions in that make it impossible to vote, to register people, thus deterring the League of Women Voters who are forced to sue, and even rock the vote. The 2 most radical groups I could ever think of of. The League of Women Voters and Rock the Vote have been severely stopped and certainly slowed down. I don't know who's next. The American Red Cross?
Yeah.
Who else are they going to stop?
Well, we need to point out that in 2000, we all remember 2000, the presidential election, 7,000 voters were wrongfully removed from the rolls. Now, this is according to Think Progress, is their number we're reporting tonight. That number was 13 times the margin of President Bush over Al Gore in the state. Now, this election, folks, with 180,000 people, if they're taken off the rolls, if Florida is that tight, and they're going after the Hispanic and African-American communities and churchgoers on Sunday and young voters, what does that tell you? I mean, it clearly, this governor, in my opinion, is part of a plan to make sure that the vote is suppressed in Florida, and it's going to swing the election, or it could, depending on how the scenarios of the other states play out. Where's the outrage here?
Well, I think it's hopefully going to come through shows like this, because this is a Republican governor who, in the past, among most Republican governors, would try to do these things subtly. Now it's in your face. There's not even a pretense about how much a voter suppression act this really is.
Mitchell Caesar, good to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much. Remember to answer tonight's question there at the bottom of the screen. Share your thoughts on Twitter at Ed Show. We want to know what you think. Donald Trump is doubling down on the birther talk, and Mitt Romney is letting him. Michael Eric Dyson weighs in on that next. And Republicans are trying to steal elections all over the country, not just Florida. The big panel of Joyanne Reed, Michael Medved, and Jim Dean weigh in on all of that. Stay with us. We're right back.